we look at our bodies like this thing that I don't really need to pay attention to
until something goes wrong.
Yes, then until it's, or I can't walk, or I can't bend my knee, or there's something going on, or I hit my finger, whatever that is. And we tend to only give attention when there's something blaringly loud at us, as opposed to being proactive. And the health insurance in this country is not going to do that. They don't care about maintenance. That's on us. We've kind of expected someone else to take care of that for us, as opposed to really owning that on our own.
Today's Into Healing guest is Dr. Todd Stranahan, a chiropractor with 3 bachelor's degrees in biochemistry, health and wellness, and human anatomy, a former firefighter, and the owner of Touch of Life Chiropractic in Austin, Texas. This is Into Healing, and I'm your host, Mira Kaddoura.
Into Healing is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Results from the healing practices may vary and are not guaranteed. Always consult a healthcare professional.
Hi, Dr. Todd.
Hi.
I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm just so excited to share this healing modality that you practice and that you love so much, because I think so many people will love learning about it.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up working in the healing space?
I was a firefighter for 10 years. Most of my adult life jobs have been serving. I think I have a real need in my heart to serve and take care of others. And I think most of them can be rooted back to that type of position and compassion in my heart for that. I was a firefighter for 10 years, almost just right at 10 years. I loved what I did, but I still had a little bit of a calling, but I didn't know where that was going to lead me. My brother is also a chiropractor, as is my wife. And at the time, I thought that my brother would be upset, like, hey, what do you're in my soup kind of thing. And after my all this, when this was kind of coming to pass, my father had been really sick. And I had been taking care of him with my mom for a few years. And after his passing, I needed some time to kind of gather. And I looked at a few things, and I was always kind of brought back to chiropractic and what, how that fits the beliefs that I have, and how it fits the beliefs that I had for others in my community. And I finally just kind of drummed up the courage one day, and said, was so worried about it. I thought he was going to be so upset. And it was the complete opposite. He was incredibly supportive and excited for me for that possibility. And then really that kind of set the stage into chiropractic school, which was, for me, it was a second career. So I wasn't a spring chicken anymore. I wasn't a young person. So I was leaving a full-time career at that point and going into kind of the unknown. I hadn't cracked a book and, educational wise at high level in a very long time. So there was definitely some worry and concern in going into that. But I think when you have that calling, that kind of lays the foundation or the road for you to, so to speak, of where you're going.
So you say, I thought it had the beliefs and values that I was looking for. What are those beliefs and values?
When I looked at a spread of modalities, and at the time, because of my previous educational experience, I was pretty open to what I could do. And I have a lot of faith in allopathic medicine, but it was just kind of like, it doesn't always take the person in whole. It's kind of like, I have this thing here, can I have this thing for that there, as opposed to kind of looking at someone as a complete individual and understanding how those things maybe affect another thing. And, I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to help people in a way that it would change their quality of life, and in doing so, kind of help them blossom from the inside.
How do you feel being a firefighter informed what you do today?
That's a good question. Mainly, it's perspective. I think, and I know you've had some things happen in your past as well, that has probably changed the trajectory and vector of your how you feel about and how you see the life and the filter that you see life. Every day, you know, people say, you know, how you doing, Dr. Todd? And I say, great, you know, and they say, how, you know,
How can you be great every day?
And they kind of look at me like this disbelief, like it's disgenuine, but it's not. It's that when you see some of the worst possible things that you can ever see in life, and those are in your you know, your rearview mirror, I think that it gives you a completely different perspective of where you are and how you really feel about life. I think that it should, you know, and when people ask me that question, I remember a couple of calls that I went on into some folks that were having some incredibly difficult times. And when I hear that question, I immediately just think of those situations and I'm like, that person's having a bad day. I'm not having a bad day. I might not have the day that I want that day, okay? But, you know, I'm not having a bad day. So for me, I honestly feel that way. It's that perspective of every day is a blessing. And I think it's hard. You know, I think gaining that perspective of blessing comes with difficult times. You know, when so much of our life is homogenous, it's easy to forget about really what that means. So for me, it's just a daily practice to think back over those times and some of those individuals that were having, you know, what I would conceive the worst possible day that you could possibly have, and use that as kind of fuel to be grateful.
Yeah, beautiful. So true. So what does a chiropractor do exactly?
You know, that's a good question. There's a lot of different opinions, even among chiropractors up along that. All I can really speak to is what I do, okay? What I do is remove the interference from the nervous system to allow it to run at its optimal highest level, and whether that means heal something, you know, have something work. And if we look globally, I think at the body itself, which is an incredibly wondrous and complex system that we sometimes always want to simplify because it makes it easier for us to kind of feel the way we feel about ourselves. But, you know, the nervous system is the master system. The brain is connected to every cell in your body, and to communicate and to work with that cell or organ or whatever part that is, it has to go through the nervous system and the spine specifically. So for me, I look at the mechanics, not only the mechanics mostly, but I'm looking at each individual segment should have a range of motion, just like your arm or any other joint in your body. But because of the experiences, what we do, the external environment, our thought processes, sometimes our body will make adjustments, or there's an injury, and that bone will be in a position where it's not having the full range of motion that it can. Therefore, it's whatever nerves are running through that potentially aren't expressing itself at 100% of its potential.
So is it just structural in bones, or is it very much trying to move energy in the actual nervous system and energetic?
I believe it's both. I think it's difficult to talk about one without the other. You know, if you ask any doctor in general and you say, well, what defines life? And they'll say something like, oh, well, your heart is pumping and you have brain activity, but we can't really quantify, or we haven't at this point quantified like spirit or energetics, which is why I think chiropractic for a while has been kind of this kind of outside thing that the allopathic medicines has kind of always pushed back against. But there's no way that we can just say that we're this mechanistic machine that only exists in moving parts. It's just not realistic. You know, we have an incredible spirit. We have an energetic set about us that there's no way that it's just that. So in chiropractic, you know, we kind of say above, down, inside, out. So as our energy flows down, we have full expression as that comes out. And part of that full expression is our body. And so relieving some of that pressure, or relieving and having that full communication, full expression of energy from our brain to the rest of us, I think is what gives us vitality and life, and the expression of life, and we determine that by lots of different things, whether it be movement, energetics, or just, there's parts of us. I mean, how important is it in a family for touch?
Super.
Right? It's with an expression. It's the way we interact. It's the way we feel. It's a hormone release. It's dopamine. It's serotonin. And all that is all run by the nervous system, right? And that's not even, and we're not even talking about pain at this point, right? We're just talking purely energetics and the possibility of life expression.
So there seems to be a lot of fear around this modality, like, does it cause harm? Can somebody get hurt? And I know we've had this conversation before, so maybe you can elaborate on that. Because I remember when we've talked about it, you said things that quite surprised me.
When I was in chiropractic school, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were in Crested Butte, and we were biking, and it was the summer, it was a summer break. I ended up having an extremely bad accident. Actually, had to be carted off the mountain. I ended up having I had a compression fracture of my lumbar 1 vertebral body. I broke off TBPs, which are the sides of the vertebrae themselves, at 3 different levels on both sides. I tore the straps off my aorta, and had a pretty severe accident. And so went in, got all checked out, and from the hospital, came back, and I mean, I was pretty mobile, at the time.
So did they say anything was wrong?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had a compression fracture of L1. I broke off, if you wanted to be technical, I had 7 fractures.
Oh, wow.
6 small ones, 1 major one, and some soft tissue damage, bruised my liver, bruised my spleen, and a couple other things. And as we were walking around town, I had a heavy history of getting energetic chiropractic work, and he came to someone who did a move on me I was unfamiliar with, and it was significant in my low back. And I don't know if they just made an error in judgment, and I ended up actually walking away with that actually worse. And I think that actually happened on purpose. I think that the reason that I went through that experience was so that I could understand how significant real pain can be. Like devastating, unrelenting, just horrible pain. And I think it taught me way more empathy and compassion for people with very serious spinal injuries. It also taught me that, what I do can be harmful as well. And it's incredibly important to be specific, to be conscious, and to have present time consciousness when you're working with somebody. Generally, chiropractors have the lowest malpractice insurance of any provider, almost any medical provider. So the chances of harmful adjustments are extremely low. But with any modality, there's always some risk and very small percentages, but the percentage is almost minuscule. So I think generally movies probably have the biggest impact on people's fear of chiropractic more than anything, because they just make it look like it's so easy to get hurt, which is just not, it's just not real. But generally, the softer handed that you are, the more specific your adjustment in terms of releasing that interference. I mean, it's just, so small. And that the fact that intention, I think, has a big part to play with that, as with any relationship, how you interact with anyone and where you hold your heart and your energy, I think, is important as well.
You just mentioned present time consciousness. Can you elaborate on what that means in case people don't know?
In this society, it's very difficult to be conscious of, we have so many things grabbing our attention from so many directions. What that means for me is when I walk in, I'm in my office, a patient or a client comes in, the door closes, short of a fire happening outside that door, this person is the most important person in my life at this moment. And that's not just a mental thing, it's also a touch thing, it's also an energy thing, it's also a spiritual thing. This person is there because they need something from you and they need help. And the only way in my eyes to do that is to hold that space here in my head and in my hands. And it makes a difference how you touch someone. It makes a difference how you adjust them. It makes a difference on everything that happens in that experience.
It seems like that probably goes back to your firefighter days of just being really in the present moment, right? Because you can't be anywhere else, really.
In the fire department, we say the training just takes over. And I don't know very many firefighters that do that job because they have a real, absolute burning desire to help people. It's because there's a lot of other difficulties with that position. So you do learn to become hyper focused, and in situations that most people would have a really hard time to operate in. So to me, in a nice quiet office, and you're not outside, sirens aren't going off, and it's a lot easier for me to be hyper focused on that environment. And I'm sure that the training and experiences of being in difficult situations leads me to make that position or make that experience a little bit easier for me.
So a new patient comes in, they've never done this before. What should they expect?
I think that most people are. I was a new patient too, right? We all kind of forget that whatever we do, that there was a day one, there was a first step, and I try to put myself in their position, right? And I try to honor that, and I just kind of bring it out. I was like, it's okay. We're going to talk about anything before we do it. There's nothing's going to scary is going to happen. We're going to talk everything through. And I think that kind of creates an experience of ease. And I think any practitioner or any healing modality that you do, trust is the most important thing, right? Connection and trust. And you want to discuss that, and it's kind of acting like someone isn't nervous is almost, I think, is a rejection of that, as opposed to kind of being open-armed and just, being there with them in that moment and sharing. It's unfortunately in the world that we live in and the insurance game that we're also involved with, there's a lot of paperwork. I think that it's about as frustrating for me as it is for patients in terms of that, but that's just part of the experience. We in our practice, and I think you can attest to this, we really want to create a family environment, because everyone in my office truly wants to be there and really wants to help people in a way that we want to not only increase their vitality, but increase their quality of life and improve the relationships and the way that they interact with everyone in their life.
So just practically speaking, what should you expect, like physically? What happens?
Physically, come in, we have a discussion about whatever someone having an issue with, whether that's just I have a pain or an injury, or I want to just increase my vitality. There's a discussion. There's a consultation, and just saying, hey, what's going on? And then depending on that, I just make a decision. Are they in the right place? Am I the right person for them? Depending on what they have going on. If I am, great. If I'm not, what can I do to pave the road for them and make that easier for them? Do I have someone that is a better fit for them? Do I have another practitioner or another doctor that would be better for what's going on with them, or a mental health professional, or is it a therapist? Is it a soft tissue issue? So you just got kind of a brief synopsis of what's going on, and then we'll go into a pretty thorough exam. After the exam, I'll make a decision. Is there anything that we find that would require any additional, whether imaging or, maybe any type of checking into before we move forward? And then And then we go into we have a handful of therapies in the office. Am I going to do that first? So we have electrical therapies, decompression, some cervical traction. And then on the actual adjustment, someone lays down, we assess after we've done an entire exam, we're trying to look at what segment is maybe the most important and do a relief hands-on adjustment to try to correct and try to induce the correct motion at that spinal segment.
How does that influence the body to start to heal itself?
Depending on the situation, most of the things I deal with are one of two things, okay? It's the initial injury or whatever the problem may be and the body's response to that, okay? I mean, the body is amazing, right? It can respond, it can heal, it can do all these things, but its number one thing is just protection anytime there's an injury. So for me, it's as I put my hands on somebody, what's the reaction, right? Is it protection? Is it there's some kind of level of giving in? And it's like this internal communication. And what I like to say is when I place my hand on somebody, it's an invitation. Is their body in a place that accepts to receive that invitation? And then once I do that, depending on what level that you're at, you have this incredible increase in neural activity where you can get increased blood flow. There's sometimes they'll have a little tingling and because you're like waking it up, right? And there's this reconnection from the brain to whatever body part that is. And it's life expression is incredibly important because any part of your body that isn't 100% in communication with your brain, it will start to either die off or wither away. It needs constant backflow of energetics and communication back and forth to actually express life and to exhibit life.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
It is powerful. I mean, I that's one of the reasons I take what I do so seriously, and because it's important.
Okay, so there's a lot of different modalities out there, right? Acupuncture, Reiki, massage therapy. How is this different in terms of like its effect on the body, or is it similar?
Well, I think we kind of alluded to some of this earlier. We have energetics and we have mechanics. I actually did Reiki early on in my career, so there's energetics. In chiropractic, to me, is more mechanics to some degree. In terms of if you have a massage therapist, you have acupuncture, they're kind of working. Acupuncture is more meridian based or energetic based. You have, let's say, Reiki or massage, which is more like soft tissue, but then kind of an offshoot there because you have Reiki, which is more energetics. Then you have like maybe some somatic stuff, so that's kind of more energetics. Mainly, what I'm working at is the actual structure itself, and making sure that at the segmental level, that has the highest expression that it can have. So I think they all have validity, and which is why I do consultations in the beginning. Is like, what do I need? Does someone need complementary care? Does someone additionally do I feel like they need some Reiki, or there's an emotional component here? And talk about that. Where's someone at? Like, really, what's going on? It surprises me how many practitioners just, okay, headache, yes, great, neck, and then just saying, how you feeling? What's going on? You seem something like something's happening with you.
There's no context.
I mean, it happens regularly. People will cry in my office because I think that there's a connection of caring, and that it kind of pulls those walls down of the things that we put up and don't want to be genuine. And it becomes so mechanistic as opposed to
you're going through the world protecting yourself, right?
Right.
And then when you're allowed to unfold a little bit. Yeah. It's so interesting when I'm thinking of like one of the last times I went to see you, and you'd done I sit a lot on a chair, you'd done some adjustments. And when I went to get up, like just before we were done, I thought we were done, you just held my hand, and just the way you pulled me up off the table, you're like, oh, something's really stuck in your wrist. And you totally like did something to my wrist. I don't even know what you did, but you did something to my wrist that I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know that there was something stuck there, and it felt so much better. And it's amazing how sometimes we just get used to living with whether it's chronic pain or discomfort, and we just like, that's how it is, right? Like there's a surrendering to like, this is how it is, and maybe I'm getting older, maybe, you know, life has taken its toll. And I love that this modality allows you to go, you can always feel better, no matter what age you are, no matter what's going on. Like there's a way to help alleviate discomfort or pain, etc. So I don't know if there's something you wanted to say there.
You know, I think sometimes when we quiet the noise of our world and of our body and our mind sometimes, and we kind of interact with, you know, the inside and that voice on the inside, which I'm going to call intuition. And sometimes when I'm with somebody or I help them up, and like, there's just like this thing, it's like, oh, there's something going on right there. And it's not anything specific, but there's a feeling there. And I've learned to trust that in terms of, because there's times when I've gone across someone and I'm about to set up and I'm like, no, it's not today. That's for another day. And then I'll go on to another position. And I think those are the important pieces to listen to in terms of being a healer and helping someone heal their body, right? Because those I think are the real cookies. You know, those are the blessings that, you know, that voice will come in and direct you, and because I think it comes from the heart.
Yeah. What kind of patients do you see, and why do they typically come for you? I know we've mentioned like injury and stuff, but maybe just give us like a cross section of the kind of people that come and what they come in for.
There is just a normal, everything from kids to geriatrics. A good percentage of my practice are very complicated cases. Whether that they've been somewhere else, whether it be other chiropractors or other practitioners have just not gotten the relief that they were looking for. I have a very analytical mind. And so, you know, the world and the body is like this amazing puzzle. It's like, you know, how, when you look at someone and you're not narrowed in, and you're kind of looking at this incredible picture, it's just like this beautiful piece of art to me, that you just have this, you know, 1,000 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, right? And you're trying to create all the pieces of them and how they all fit together. And so I think that for me, that I have a pretty good talent for that. I have a good talent for getting a feel for maybe what would be the best thing for somebody. And I think some of that just leads back to some of the earlier conversations that we had, which was, I never forget what that feels like to be in a place that pain is overcoming my life, right? And we sometimes forget about the intangible pieces of that, which is relationships. You know, it's how do you interact with your child
When you're in pain.
when you're in a massive amount of pain. You know, you're not going to be loving, you're not going to be compassionate. How much of an effect on that does it have on that relationship? How much does that have an effect on the relationship with your husband or your brothers or your sisters or whatever? And, you know, when people sometimes ask me, they say, what do you, we're sitting in an airplane, what do you do? And I say, I'm in the quality of life business.
That's good.
Right?
I love that.
Because that really is, you cannot operate at a high level of love and compassion and high vitality level of living if you're in a massive amount of pain, whether it be chronic or not. For me, I think we see a little bit of everything. We see kids, we see, you know, normal working moms and dads. We see people who, I see people who have pretty severe, you know, injuries in terms of, I'm also someone I feel like that is willing to work on patients maybe that other people aren't. I worked on patients that have been hit by a shotgun. I've had patients with real massive spinal deformations. Obviously, because of my fractures, I'm willing to work on patients that have spinal fractures. Obviously, within good reason, we don't adjust with good practice. But the rest of the spine is important. I'm in my 50s. I've had some very serious spinal fractures. I get adjusted at least on the weekly, and I essentially have no pain. Right? And it's incredibly important for me to keep that segmental motion for the rest of my life. And I think, generally we look at our bodies like this thing that I don't really need to pay attention to
until something goes wrong.
Yes, then until it's, or I can't walk, or I can't bend my knee, or there's something going on, or I hit my finger, whatever that is. And we tend to only give attention when there's something blaringly loud at us, as opposed to being proactive. And the health insurance in this country is not going to do that. They don't care about maintenance. They care about prevention mostly. And, that's on us. We've kind of expected someone else to take care of that for us, as opposed to really owning that on our own. So we see PI cases, meaning personal injury, MVAs.
What are MVAs?
Motor vehicle accidents.
Oh, okay.
We see a fair bit of that. We see geriatric patients, a lot of people. And then, baby boomers are one of the largest populations of folks in this country that need help. And a lot of practitioners won't take Medicare, which is unfortunate. We're kind of caught in this weird dichotomy of insurance is how I'm going to make decisions about my health, which is unfortunate.
Seems, talking about pain makes me think we're not just talking about vitality, we're talking about mobility too.
Yeah.
As we age, you think you're going to be less and less mobile, but that doesn't necessarily have to be true.
It does not. Yeah. And I think most folks, as we get into our 60s, they have this belief like, okay, I'm going to be great. I'm going to have every movement possibility that I have, and then I'm going to die. Right? Which is, that people have that mentality though, as opposed to what really happens is you kind of have this slope and it degrades over time, and it doesn't have to be that way. You can put time and effort into that and creating that motion. Movement is life. Keeping our body moving at a neurological level, the spine has more joint position sensors than anywhere else in the body, which is the main thing that fires up into the brain and wakes us up. It's our prefrontal cortex. It gives us reason. It's the reason that we can, do some of the things that we want to do. It dampens the other maybe negative aspects of the brain in terms of, rage or anger or jealousy. So there's a component there neurologically. So the more that you move, the more important is you can push those things off. There's a leading regenerative or longevity medicine, which is now, I'm sure that you're aware, is just becoming a huge field. And it's like, how do we live as long as we can with the highest quality of life that we can, with the most amount of movement that we can? And it boils down to, as we get older, we need to do movements that are based upon what you want to do. So, and I'm a big follower of Peter Attia. I never can say his name right. Attia.
Yeah.
And he always talks about the importance of, hey, can you get luggage up into an airplane? He actually specifically talks about spinal segmental movement, which I'm blaringly like, chiropractic, man, right here, right?
And what does that mean?
It means what that means is that there is gross movement. So if I stood up here and I touch my toes, that's a gross movement. We're looking at, when you touch your toes, you should bend in an arc, right? Every segment should have motion.
Instead of
like, well, I'm just going to pivot at L5, S1, like I'm a hinge. And it's like, whoa. There's a whole bunch of other vertebrae in there that you want them all to move in a three-dimensional space at the highest level of range of motion that they can, which gives you the highest expression of energy and life expression that you can.
Why is it so hard for people to see the value of that? Is it because we want a quick fix or something?
Well, that's sure part of it. I mean, I want a quick fix too, right? When people come see me, sometimes one of the educational processes is like, listen, it just says Dr. Todd on the door. It doesn't say miracle worker, right? It does. I'm magic.
You're
right?
trying your best.
What I'm doing. There's a set of systems that I'm working within, and sometimes we have this belief that I have been fine, and then I woke up with this issue.
I can't move.
Right? I can't move. It must be just the switch. Oh, can you just go in there and flip that switch for me? And I was like, yeah, if you'll tell me where it is, I'd be happy to do that. But that's not realistic. We forget how incredibly complex we are because most people, that's just not their area of expertise. It's like, I'm aware of my body, but as long as it just keeps moving forward and keeps moving and having a good time, and it's not talking to me in any way, it must be fine. But we can lose an enormous amount of function because part of the body's experience is moving things around so that you don't really notice it. And pain is actually one of the last indicators of dysfunction. It's just because now you have this alarm going off, like bing, bing, bing. I can't handle this anymore. I need something else going on, and it's a mentality issue, I think, in terms of not really being aware of our own bodies, not paying attention to the little things, because in this country, we just head down, ram through, and there's this high expectation of being a workaholic, and and there's this bravado, and for men particularly, that you just have to keep pushing, you have to keep push through the pain. It's like, that's crazy. You're just basically tearing the system down even farther than you already were. Why don't you just address it? When I wish that there would be an awareness on people to know how important their body is, and really gathering their experience and education and awareness that, hey, I got this amazing ship and this amazing body. If I don't take care of it, it's not going to take care of me.
Yeah, I remember discovering chiropractic. I don't even remember when, but over 10 years ago for sure. And I remember a story from when I was young, and my mom just woke up one day and couldn't move. Like something happened in her spine that she just couldn't move, and she had to go into surgery to regain any movement in her legs. And I remember thinking, like, there must have been so many things that had to happen to reach that point, right? To literally get up in the morning and then not be able to move anymore. And how do we try to avoid that? How do we avoid these wake-up calls that kind of come when our body's been maybe giving us signs for a long time, but we haven't picked up on them, and then suddenly our bodies are like, we're done. you know?
It happens more than I obviously wish that it would. And again, I think some of it just leads to, we just don't pay attention.
We don't pay attention.
Because, hey, I've got 2 kids, and I've got to get them taken care of, and I've got to go to work, and but
it's the oxygen mask, right? It's like, if we are not taking care of this thing, how are we supposed to take care of everybody else? And I'm guilty of it too,
Sure.
because of work and kids and everything else. But once you've had a few of those awakenings of your body shutting down or not doing what you want it to do, you kind of get better at listening to those signs.
You should. It doesn't always happen that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think it's a product that so many things are trying to grab for our attention. You know what? There's not time for me right now, as opposed to, creating an attention, a 10, 15% more of our attention to ourselves. We can now do 100% more of that. And not only can we do 100%, but we can do it with more love and compassion in terms of taking care of others. But it's just, I think, for ourselves, we in this country, we feel like we have to be doing so much externally, and I think there is an awakening. I think people are coming aware of how important it is to take care of ourselves. I mean, we know there's very few people don't know that smoking is bad for us. We know that exercise is healthy, but do a large percent of the population do that? No. And it's like, and it's a bigger issue. Right? Is it time? Is it mental capacity? Is it socioeconomic? Is it financial reasons? Is it just strictly I'm too thin? I'm a single mom, and I've got 4 kids, and I'm doing my best, and I get it, right? And it is tough in those scenarios to even come up with a a plan for people to talk with them about that, because there's so much consciousness like, hey, I just you need to set my broken arm so I can get back in the game. And like, well, it's still broken. Yeah, I know. I've got another hand though, so it's okay. And it's become, an enlightenment issue of how do we take care of this thing I call me.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about the nervous system, because I'm so fascinated about how this whole thing runs so much in our body.
The truth is that we only know a percentage of that. We have some postulations. We know some basic theories about it. So if you said, why is the nervous system important? I'd say you couldn't even exist and interact with your environment without it. You couldn't communicate, you couldn't touch anything, you couldn't feel anything, you couldn't move. It is what controls every part of your organ, every your heart, your lungs, all these mechanisms that run 100% without any of your consciousness whatsoever is all controlled by the nervous system, right? So is it important? Obviously, I feel like it's the most important system in the body. And that's not even talking about energetics. We're just purely talking mechanistic and not necessarily even vitality. But the nervous system is amazing. It basically, you have ions or cells that extend from the brain, through the spinal cord themselves, and then out to wherever they end. And there's just a couple of cells that do that. And as we talk about upper and lower motor neurons, it becomes very complex in terms of the pieces that are involved. But generally, you have this spinal cord that between each level of vertebra, you have a nerve that exits on both sides, okay? So as you can imagine, so if you go through all the different levels, at every level, you have these nerves that exit between each set of vertebra. And that cord, the spinal cord itself, will get smaller and smaller, because if you can imagine, it's like a tightly wound piece of a whole bunch of pieces of linguine. And they come out at every level. So that cord, that cable becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as we get down to the bottom, okay? Which is why disc herniations, particularly, or bulges, are such a problem up in the neck, because the cord is very big and the spinal canal is very small in reference to the cord. So there's not a lot of room around it, as opposed to in the lumbars or lower part of your spine, the cord is almost not even, in some places, even isn't solid. It's just individual nerves that run down, almost like, angel hair pasta. And the canal is very large when the nerves are very small in reference to each other. So you can have a pretty big disc herniation in the low back if it goes straight posterior or to the back, and if it doesn't go to the sides, because there's a lot of space there. And the one above, that's why particularly neck injuries can be so devastating, is because it can clamp the cord or injure the cord at a very high level. And the cord is very slow to heal. Inflammation has a big impact on how the cord functions and how it works in terms of the effects of your body in reference to the cord and to the nerves themselves.
So how do you work with a herniated disc, for example?
Carefully.
Yeah, and over time, I bet, like it takes a long time to...
It does. I try to explain that, it's like a broken arm, or a broken leg, but you're walking on that broken leg all the time. It's not like you can alleviate the pressure on a disc. I would say, conservative-wise, chiropractic is probably the very first step in a disc bulge injury, or one that's been going, because we're also talking about there's a difference between a chronic one that's been a problem for a long time, and maybe an acute one that just happened. Those treatment modalities are a little bit different in terms of how they work and how long they take to heal, right? If you had a broken arm and you re-broke it like every month for 4 years, the healing process is going to be very, very slow. And it's age-related. I kind of say, well, if you could think of your body in healing processes like a garbage business, you only have so many garbage trucks, you only have so many people to work on those garbage trucks, so you only have so much available in your body. So if you have this problem where, you have multiple things going wrong with you, maybe you have, maybe you have diabetes, and maybe you have some other type of diagnoses that are injuries, or maybe you have systemic inflammation, you only have so many resources to heal yourself. So those instances, it's going to take longer to heal somebody and to take care of them, just because they have more things for the body to drive attention to. And which is why when as you get older, paying more attention to yourself and to your body is so important. You know, the less things are wrong with you, the longer you're going to live. The less things that are wrong with you, the more apt you are to be able to heal when something does come up, right? We lose structural integrity, we lose muscle integrity as we age, and which is why movement-based activities is so important.
How do you know when, say, surgery or medication is needed? Because obviously those are kind of part of the equation when somebody gets injured, right?
I think it's a complementary situation. Every case is just a little bit different. If you want to say, where does medicine have its place? We have the best emergency medicine in the world, okay? When it comes to acute injuries, we are fantastic. But if you're talking about, you know, level of life expectancy and, you know, where we are, pretty low down the list, because we don't value, again, what we were just talking about, which is prevention, right? And becoming aware, taking care of ourselves with maintenance and health and exercise and doing all the things that we know that we should do, but we also don't create an environment in the workplace to make those things important.
Yeah, to value those things,
right.
Yeah. Or in life,
yes.
In and out of work, yeah.
You know, we kind of look at it as a plateaus. If we're getting good, if we're using conservative care, we're getting a good response, great, we just keep going in that trajectory. If somehow we either plateau or you just get a feel, again, intuition, you know, someone really needs something more on board than what we have, hey, why don't you contact your primary care? Why don't you go see them? Why don't we see if we can add some additional, you know, either prescription over the counter medications to kind of help with the situation. And everyone is individual. So as we're increasing and getting better, increasing function, decreasing pain, increasing stability, number of adjustments are going down, the severity of the adjustments are coming down. But if we plateau and we just get to a point within a very reasonable amount of time, and there's some intuition to, you know, sometimes you just think, this is not progressing the way that we need to. Or we add a modality, or we do what's maybe a decompression where we're offloading the pressure on the disc. Maybe we're adding some things that kind of step up the notch in terms of what type of therapies that we can do. And then you just kind of have to look at that and say, well, is this someone who's just healing slowly because they have other things happening? Or is it just the situation they need more help? And I'm proud to say that I have a group of you know, references that we're able to pull from and say, hey, this is going to be we're going to kind of co-manage this situation with this other doctor or MD or pain management or surgeon or whatever that might be. Most people, surgery is a last option for them. And I feel that most orthopedics and neurosurgeons will say, let's exhaust all possible conservative cares till we really look at surgery, because it has its own set of issues in terms of that, right? But you just kind of take case by case basis, and as long as we have good improvement, we're seeing increases in mobility, and we're seeing increases in stability, then we can kind of continue on that path.
You know, I'd love to talk about accessibility, because it's so important to me to make sure that healing is accessible to people. So how can anyone get access to chiropractic work?
I would do what I do for free if I could. You know, I just love it so much. But I feel that because of the system that we have in place, that's just obviously not possible. As just a business owner, you have to make it work, right? I mean, I can't see people if I can't keep the doors open.
Yeah, well, you know, I've come in to see you and gotten adjusted for like $40. So it's also not like you're not paying $300 to actually just go in for 20 minutes and have something worked on and feel better, you know?
I try to operate within the guidelines within the guidelines, and still have an ability to be accessible to those. And we still have we have plans in place for people who are their financial situation is different, because I never want to turn anyone away. I just have to operate within a set of guidelines that are fairly strict. But my heart is always in a place that, I want to help everyone.
Yeah. So is chiropractic work all the same, or is there different kind of a range of different things within the practice?
I mean, you have everything from people who do strictly energetic work all the way to people who only do soft tissue work, and pretty much everything in between. It's kind of a complex animal in terms of, what the really modality is. And as a practitioner, we have different styles or techniques that we use to see patients and the way that we operate. And I've had it all. I've had everything from what we call network chiropractic. My brother was a network chiropractor for like 10, 15 years before he ever did structural work. My background was in energetics. I did my, early childhood.
I don't even know, what network practice.
Network chiropractic is really, you're just doing energetic work. So you're just going in, touching spots on the spine to elicit a nervous system response. But it's it's just very light touch. It's kind of almost like, I would say, meridian work, in terms of you're going in and you're trying to affect the energetic parts of the nervous system. Which is, that's probably the far left. And then you have people who do all the way to the other side, which is just soft tissue work. And then structural work, I think, is kind of in between. It kind of slides from one side to the other. And then the techniques that we use are very varied. Loving what you do always will make you proficient at what you do, right? Because people care that you care before they care about anything else. So as long as, and I've had great adjustments in all different types of, techniques of adjusting, and just being really good at what you do is really what matters. And being centered in your heart, and really caring about people, I think that really is what makes the difference.
I want to dig into energy and consciousness a little bit.
Okay.
How do you think about those things in your practice?
I do daily practices when I get to my office to get my mind and my body and my consciousness in the right place. I do what I do because I want to serve humanity, right? Every day I want to leave it in a better place than I started with the end of that day. And that's how I put my head down at night, feeling good about my day. I think having the right consciousness mentally here and in here allows me to be in a place of compassion and empathy, because I think that's what we really, as humans, we want to connect, right? We want to be there for each other. When, you 10 times a day, you say, well, how are you doing? Oh, I'm great. How are you doing? Right? But what we really want is, how are you doing?
Yeah. How are you really doing?
How are you really doing? We want to be able to connect in a real way, in a genuine way, in a vulnerable way. And I think that takes, being aware of your consciousness, being aware of where you are energetically, right? Taking home life and leaving it at home and kind of dropping it at the door and be like, okay, I've been in a position here to be able to, blessing to be able to serve those in need. And I can't be, if I'm all upset about something, I can't do that here and here. So I have to kind of let that go. I have this kind of rule that it's like, bad things can happen to me and that's okay. Okay. But I'm going to give myself anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour to let that go. I'm going to get it all out, and then it's through, and I need to work through, I need to be past that in terms of getting back in center here, getting my consciousness and my heart right. So I go through daily practices when I get to work to get centered, get my mind and consciousness in a spot of healing, in a spot of compassion, in a spot of empathy, to be there. And I do my best to convey that in every way possible with my patients.
Do you think chiropractic work taps into energy and consciousness?
Oh, yeah.
How?
I mean, then your body is one gigantic energetic rod, right? And that flow of that electron, the flow of that energy is through your nervous system. So chiropractic to me is structurally and energetically, when you combine the two together and you say, well, my structure protects my energetics, then then there has to be a discussion about chiropractic, because that's what is the house, that's the vehicle for that. So to me, they go hand in hand.
How does one go about choosing the right chiropractor?
That's a good question. When you go see any practitioner, regardless of who it is, whether it's your chiropractor, your primary care, your surgeon, whatever that might be, do you trust them? Right? Do you get a good feel that they truly care about you there, and that you're a team atmosphere, right? It's not this like domineering father to son. It's, hey, we need to be a team here. It's my body, your skills. How do we put those together to come up with the best possible outcome and increase my, my vitality in life? And I would say, listen to your intuition. What speaks to you? If that speaks to you, then, make them appointment with them and sit down and have a consultation. And is that a good fit for you? Right? Because again, it's about doing that together, and it's finding the right fit for you.
Yes. So is there anything else that you feel we haven't covered that you feel called to share?
I would say this. It's my dream that the entire planet be under chiropractic, in some form of fashion, maintenance-wise. And I think it's not just because I'm a chiropractor, because I feel that's one of the major things that you can do to put your mind and your spirit and your body in the right place, and it remove any physical interference that might have a dramatic effect on your quality of life and the quality of life of those around you. I'm a big believer in not only the healing power of it, but just the mobility portion of it and moving forward. If you don't take care of your body, it's not going to take care of you. And that's just not our physical body, right? That's our mental body, that's our emotional body, that's our spiritual body. And taking care of that and honoring it almost like it's the most precious child that you've ever held is gonna pay huge dividends for you in your spirit, in your life, in your quality of life, and in those around you.
How do you generate openness and mobility through touch?
The way that you do that is being genuine and having a true space in your heart for care and compassion for others. I mean, pain and difficulty is overwhelming. And I think we use touch as humans to convey caring and compassion. And
like, you're okay.
You're okay. I'm here. We're here this together. We're going to get through this. And that I truly care. And I think that comes from the well of love as humans, as we interact with each other. And I think we can all kind of tell when people are just genuine, but when we really have that genuine interaction and we really feel that from other people, I think that's the truest way that we convey that.
How does healing the individual body affect collective healing?
I think that you can't separate them, right? I think the physical is tied to the emotional. We have almost as much nerve tissue in our stomach and around our intestines that we have in our brain. It's like considered now to be the second brain. There's no way to kind of, I'm going to put my physical body over here and my emotional body. We're all, we're this melting pot of amazing things. And the physical body is going to have an impact on our emotional body. It's going to have an impact on our mental capacity. If nothing else, if pain's screaming in your head, it's very hard to even listen to anything or to be conscious if you have this thing kind of, almost roaring at you all the time. And I would say that think of your body as something that needs attention, just like you do your car, or if you're taking care of your bicycle or brushing your teeth. There's some level of awareness that needs to happen. You need to look inward and see what's happening in there, quiet some of that noise, and just listen to what it's telling you.
Sometimes that feels scary to people.
Sure. Well, we're inundated with attention, right? I mean, particularly younger people, we're seeing this dramatic rise in curvature changes, particularly in the neck, And
Phone.
yeah, because they're looking down at their phone all the time. We see these reversing curves in x-rays from kids that are in high school that we wouldn't normally see till 30 years old. There is a medical diagnosis called texting neck. It's in the ICD-10 diagnosis codes. And it's because it's such an advancement, because we've created these dopamine hits so significantly that we crave it all the time. And very seldomly do we kind of put all those things aside and put in some silence and, do some, whether it be meditation or spiritual thought, and get quiet. Because you're right, I think can be uncomfortable for people. And it's just something we don't, in this culture, unfortunately, don't put a lot of value and emphasis on.
Yeah, very true.
And I think there's a consciousness question here, that when we have a strong consciousness, we have an effect, right? So we're made up of atoms, and inside atoms are things called electrons and protons, right? So just basic science. The nucleus inside of an atom, let's say that that thing was about the size of a pea, okay? In terms of the very first electron shell would be like the outside of a huge stadium. So our collective ability to have an emphasis and effect on others in our community and others around us is huge, right? So from a consciousness, and you're saying, okay, a consciousness is a collection of thoughts and people that come together for either a common purpose or just sharing an idea. Well, if my consciousness is strong in terms of where I am mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, then that will automatically have an impact on a larger scale.
What individual practice or daily practice could you recommend for people?
The daily practice I recommend for people is just movement. Before you get out of bed, move your arms, move your legs, get the blood flowing. As we were laying in bed at night and not moving, a lot of times, because of the diets and things we eat and things we do, we get some swelling inside the facets or the joints of the spine itself. And so kind of getting up, the pumping, we pump out fluid or we reduce inflammation in our joints by movement. So waking up and just kind of moving everything, getting everything going, having some daily routine, whether it be movement-based, right? First thing in the morning, right? Get up, do some of that. If you can do some little bit of quiet time, even if 30 seconds to a minute is better than nothing. Quiet your mind, get an idea of what's going on for you that day, and kind of centering yourself gets you ready to take on the day. Movement is vitally important. The more movement that you do, exercise, get outside, get connected to nature, right? I think those are probably the biggest ones to at least start with. 30, if I remember correctly, it's 30 minutes of some type of lightly rigorous activity reduces your chance of heart attack by like half, if you can do that consistently. So we're built to be a movement-based thing, right? And we're also built to communicate and to connect. So take a walk with your kids, right? Take a walk with your wife or your husband or your significant other or the special person in your life. That gives you an opportunity to connect, gives you an opportunity to, share some moments and get a little exercise.
Yeah, or with your dog.
Yeah, with your dog. That's even better, right?
How do we check in with ourselves and know if it's a good time to get support or get help with our physical body?
I would say look at your routine. Well, if you're driving a car and you can't turn your head to see your mirrors, you should probably have somebody take a look at that, right? That's surprisingly, we need a certain amount of mobility to accomplish some of the goals in our daily practices. If you can't put your shoes on, you can't bend down to put your shoes on without some type of pain or discomfort, that'd be one of the things that you would take a look at. If you're taking your kid to school and something comes up, and in those times where I think we mentioned where you take a second and just kind of check in with your body, like in the first thing in the morning, like, how am I doing? Okay, my head's moving pretty good. How are my shoulders? Moving around a little bit, get a little movement in there. How's the low back? A little bit of light stretching music. And if you see those kind of indicators like, ooh, it feels a little tight in there. Is it tight? Is it just need a little more, stretch? Or is it maybe something like, hey, this is just a small indication of something else happening that needs a little bit of addressing, right? The body has a limitation of matter. It doesn't have an infinite about to heal itself, so it needs sometimes external input to kind of help it heal up. So those are the practices that I would say is look at yourself. Can you no longer look in your rearview mirror? Can you see both of your side mirrors particularly, right? Are you biking? If you're biking, are you able to turn back and look back for other cars? If you're jogging, are you able to, do some of those things? If you're sitting at work and you have to buy chairs and get a special desk and do all these extra special things because there's some part of you that's always hurting, well, maybe your setup isn't right. Maybe you have something there that needs to be addressed or looked at. And it doesn't have to be, dramatic, but sometimes people, I think, either blow it off like it's no big deal, don't have time for it, don't have money for it, or they actually don't want to know. They might just be scared that this might be a bigger problem, and then they're scared of what that looks like. But if that's the case, the longer that you wait, the just worse it gets. It doesn't always mean that you have some kind of major problem. Most people, I feel like, have a pretty minor problem the earlier they get to it.
So I've had a yoga practice for a long time, and some of my runner friends, I've tried to kind of get on the yoga train, and there's a resistance to it. Oh, I'm not flexible. Oh, I'm not, that's not for me. And it seems like we're all flexible if we try to be flexible. This idea of dismissing that we're just not flexible.
We define ourselves by the words that we use. Therefore, if I'm inflexible, right? Be careful of the words. Be careful of the words that you say to yourself on the outside. Be careful of the words that you say to yourself on the inside. We're our biggest critics. No one tears us down more than we do because we know all the little things about ourselves that contribute to the way that we feel about ourselves. So it's common practice for me to talk to people if they have something going on. I have DDD.
I don't even know what that is.
Degenerative disc disease, because they'll hear that term if they get an X-ray or something. I'm like, that doesn't define you. I mean, I have people that you look at X-rays and you think, oh man, they must be in an enormous amount of pain. Like, no, they move pretty good. So it's not always a product of just because you see something that you may use a descriptive word for, it doesn't define you. If I'm a jogger, for example, you're talking to your friends that are joggers or runners, you'd say, you could run a lot better if you do some yoga. Your stride, the way that your mechanics would work would be a lot better. And just say that, I'm not flexible. It's like, well, then you're also going to be prone to injury, because particularly running at high stride lengths, if you have a tight hamstring, you're going to potentially have a problem there. So I think it's more of a commonplace of the words that we use to describe ourselves, because we use those as a reason not to do it, right? I don't really want to go stretch because I say that I'm not flexible. It's not like the potential. We don't say, boss, I can't do that because I'm just really not a hard worker. and I just don't think that I want to write that much. My hands, they actually won't type that much on your report. So sorry, I won't be able to get that done, right? And it's just because we're using that word to limit what we do, as opposed to, that's a possibility. I should look into the possibility of what that means for me. I have currently not been as flexible as I would like, but hey, I'd like to get more flexible. But I think that sometimes a nice way of saying, I don't want to do it. Right? It's a question of, that sounds like work, I kind of already like what I do now. That might take some energy, into any time that we try to change vectors or to improve ourselves, there's no way to do that without either change or work.
Or discomfort.
Discomfort, right. Discomfort's your friend. We kind of, avoid it like it's the worst thing in the world. But I mean, that's where change and that's where growth happens. You don't create growth or change or physical growth. You don't go to the gym and just like stare at the weights like, whew, that was hard work. right? Those changes don't come without some input of energy and discomfort, and that's how we create discipline. And I believe discipline is just what leads us to self-confidence. So in a roundabout way, I think that it's a way to either not do those practices or a way to limit ourselves because we create these belief systems about ourselves at a young age, and some of the words that we use are what creates a limitation of what the possibility is for us.
Oof. That's really powerful.
And I think if we could drop some of those conversations and believe in the infinite possibility of what is possible for all of us, it would change the world.
Yes, it would. Thank you, Dr. Todd.
Thank you.
I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. You can connect with Into Healing on TikTok and Instagram for more inspirational and behind-the-scenes content, and visit our website, intohealing.com, for transcripts and other goodies. Thank you for joining us.